Well, hello. Today we're talking with Minneapolis Mayor and Greater MSP Board Member Jacob Frey. Welcome, Mayor.
Thanks so much for having me, Peter.
It's great to see you, even virtually. So Minneapolis sits at the heart of this region and plays an outsized role in our economy and our culture. What happens in Minneapolis has a material impact in every part of our region, and a strong Minneapolis lifts every other city across the region. This has been a historically hard year for every major US city, and a particularly challenging year for Minneapolis due to the killing of George Floyd. We have been in the spotlight this year, but not for reasons we're proud of. But now the world is watching us, and we have the opportunity to lead by tackling racial injustice and racial inequities head on and achieving transformative change. Because of the efforts of hundreds of amazing people in our community, progress is happening on the ground, but it's not always making the headlines. So today, Mayor, we're interested to hear about not only the challenges we face, but the progress we're making, and look ahead to what's possible for Minneapolis and our region in 2021 and beyond. So first question, give us an overview of your top priorities for the city of Minneapolis here at the end of 2020 and the progress that you see in those areas.
Thank you for the question, Peter, and thank you for the opportunity to address the greater MSP community. Obviously, we have had a series of crises that have been sandwiched on top of one another this year, from a global pandemic, an economic downturn, the killing of George Floyd, and the subsequent unrest. And undoubtedly, we have had to prioritize in a big way at the city. And we have been focusing on kind of two overarching pieces. The first is a commitment to core city services to make sure we are delivering those essential services with excellence, be that public safety, which is of crucial importance, or water supply, or filling the potholes, clearing the snow. Those basic city services that people rely on, we need to be delivering on with excellence, and we can't let up just because these crises have hit hard. Secondly, we need to be prioritizing those who are struggling most. And in that, there is a very deliberate focus on people who are experiencing homelessness, those who are experiencing unsheltered homelessness, and those who need food and shelter, those basic and foundational elements that every single human being needs. That has been a big focus. And, as tough as times are right now, and with the governor's recent restrictions that were recently announced, there's still a whole lot of room for hope. Every single morning I get up and I tell myself the truth, which is that all of these crises are also an opportunity to do things differently, to do things better, to reimagining how our economy functions, and to provide collaboration and partnership where it didn't previously exist. So the state of our city, yes, it continues to be strong. The tasks ahead are daunting, but we as a community, we will be on the right path.
Appreciate that. And one of the mechanisms that the city has helped create to drive things forward, to bring people together, is called Minneapolis Forward, an approach to recovery and transformation from both an economic and racial justice standpoint. I expect many across the region either haven't heard about Minneapolis Forward or they don't know much about it. Could you talk to us about its goals and its leaders and activities and progress to date?
Absolutely. Minneapolis Forward is the coalition that we have assisted in creation around recovery, rebuild, and transformation. As I mentioned just a second ago, we need to look at these times as an opportunity to do things differently. And when, sadly but truly, some of the corridors, neighborhoods, and people that were hardest hit by COVID-19 and continue to be are the same places that were hardest hit by the unrest following the killing of George Floyd. And so we're trying our best to focus resources on those geographic areas and communities as much as possible. And we created this coalition, Minneapolis Forward. And it's tasked with, again, reimagining how economic inclusion can work, making sure that we're centering our Black and brown voices and business owners in the process, not just in the decision-making, but also as key beneficiaries. And this coalition was formed. Now, importantly, this coalition is not part of the city. It is supported by the city. There's an individual from my office, Sean Pierce, who functions in many ways as an executive director. It has the full backing and support of our community planning and economic development department. But the coalition issues recommendations that do not require council approval. They do not go through the normal bureaucratic process. And what this enables us to do is bolster the efforts that are underway, bolster the ideas and vision of community without hindering. It allows us to push money in. It allows me to go out and shake the bushes to raise as much funds as we possibly can, but still to enact the vision that community has provided. And I think it's a new model that will work very well. And so they've issued a range of recommendations, everything from business navigators and technical support to make sure that businesses along these corridors can get the insurance that, in fact, they are due, to work their way through the city process and to expedite some of these issues, whether it's clearing of rubble or setting up a new energy system. And so it includes business navigators. It also includes things like our commercial property development fund, which allows for the purchase of these underlying parcels to expedite the process and to keep the communities that have made these neighborhoods wonderful to begin with there.
So basically it's a mechanism for identifying and solving the problems on the ground with the people who are affected most immediately.
It is. It's by and for community. And it also allows an additional efficiency of decision-making that you couldn't necessarily have from within City Hall all the time. And so, it took another month or two to get this thing set up, but rather than it just be some decision coming from a top, it stems from community itself. And we certainly need the support, and we're working towards it right now, but I do view this as a really good next step.
And then as we think ahead, maybe for the next quarter, maybe 3 months from now, 4 months from now, how are those challenges that Minneapolis Forward is addressing, how are they changing? Kind of what's on the horizon?
So I think there's a number of pieces, some of which you can see visually, some of which you can't. I'll first talk about what you can see. We have invested $2 million in rubble clearance. I'm a believer that we need to see some recovery visibly very quickly, both from COVID-19, also the unrest, to see a full transformation. And so we did want to take a little bit of time to allow the insurance companies to first cover the cost, which many have done. Sometimes they don't. But in areas where we're hitting some form of roadblock, we want to be able to come in to clear these parcels and to prepare them for economic inclusive growth. So that's stuff that needs to happen like right away. And then the next step is, all right, let's make sure that these parcels can be in the hands of someone and some community member that is ready to go with a vision and that is properly capitalized to get the job done. And so we've got a commercial property development fund that provides gap assistance to allow for these parcels to be purchased and purchased quickly, so that we can take the next step in terms of this reboot of our economy. And that's kind of the way I'm thinking about it right now. This is, in many respects, this is kind of keeping the pilot light of our economy running, even in sectors that have in part been shut down, so that we can reignite once COVID-19 in part passes.
Yeah. That makes sense. So, kind of moving to the next obvious question about kind of downtown, which is on everybody's mind. There was good news. After a national search that lasted more than a year, Deluxe decided to not only keep its headquarters in the Minneapolis-Saint Paul region, but announced that it would be moving its headquarters to downtown Minneapolis next year, which was exciting news for the city and for downtown. COVID-19 has hit downtowns across the country and the globe very hard. And it's opened up questions about what downtowns will look like in the future. So what do you see, or what do you want to see for downtown Minneapolis in 2021 and beyond? How might it be different? and how can we make it even better?
Well, first, let's revel in your great work, Peter, and so many others in ensuring that Deluxe did, in fact, move their headquarters to our downtown core. I mean, that's somewhere in the range of 550 some odd jobs that have come downtown in one fell swoop. Now, that doesn't happen often during a pandemic. That doesn't happen when we're totally in the clear. I mean, I don't remember the last time that we got an influx of 550 employees in a new corporate headquarters in our downtown. And so the fact that we got that, I think, is a major coup. And there are so many sectors right now, tech, and IT, and marketing, a lot of these professional jobs, as you've pointed out, that are actually thriving right now. Obviously, some of the service sectors, restaurants, and some forms of retail are down. And that is in large part due to COVID-19, but I don't want to undermine what is going well. And so, having a new way of thinking about downtown and downtown real estate, I think may have been inevitable, but perhaps it was expedited by COVID-19. So rather than have this discussion 4, 5, and 6, and 10 years from now, we're having it today. It's not the worst thing in the world, but clearly it is going to take an all hands on deck effort to figure out kind of what's next. I think we're going to need to fully reignite the streetscape in a big way. I mean, at the end of this of COVID-19 and the quarantining that so many of us have to do, I think we're going to want to find a way to get people passionate about being outside again and being with each other. And I think that passion is clearly there, but we're going to need to provide the outlets immediately. We're going to need to make sure that some of these businesses that have in some ways been put on ice can restart as quickly as possible. So we want to expedite any permitting process, any outstanding liquor licenses, for instance, to get things moving as quickly as possible. I think we need to be looking to some of the experts in our brokerage and real estate firms as to how electronic communication, like the one we're having right now, could perhaps change things for the longer term. I don't want to necessarily hypothesize, what will happen in the, years 3 and 4 and 5 without really consulting our experts, but undoubtedly the use of space will change. It'll change in our professional sectors. It'll change in our retail sectors. And I think that's not necessarily a bad thing. It was probably inevitable given the way technology is moving right now. But we're going to have to be on the cutting edge.
Yeah, and it's as you said, it's a moving target, and it's not all going one direction. I mean, there are a lot of different signals happening. I mean, we're seeing companies continue to take new space, in downtown Minneapolis,
Sure.
and St. Paul. So it's not a one-note story.
Yeah, you're right about that. And I mean, despite all of some of the negative stories that you've heard over the last, 11 months now, I mean, Peter, I think you can attest to this. Professionals and workers who are our age, they want to be downtown. Mm. That mentality has not changed. If you want to recruit a workforce for the next 20 and 30 years, a workforce that at this point is even younger than us, you want to be in an area that is cooking, where there's things to do, there's places to eat, there's people to see. And, notwithstanding everything that's happened over the last 11 months, that place will still be downtown. It will be.
Well, and as you said, I mean, there's going to be a boom in togetherness, likely, as we're able to come out of winter and out of the pandemic in a way that's safe from a public health standpoint. People want to be together, and they're probably going to want to be together more than ever to make up for lost time. So part of what's going to enable that also, especially as it relates to downtown, is the feeling of safety, and you raised that. Let's talk about what's changing around policing, police reform, and public safety. I mean, based on everything we've experienced this year, and what have we learned about how to become a more just and peaceful city? And what are the steps being taken to move us in that direction?
Safety has to be a top priority of any mayor, of any city government. And on this topic, my position has not changed a lick. I believe that we need deep structural change, a full culture shift in how our police department operates, and we need police. We need law enforcement. There are instances when people need to be able to call 911 and have response from an officer. Obviously, we have seen some significant attrition over the last 5 months here. It's important just to acknowledge that. We normally on an annual basis, we see attrition of officers in the range of 40 to 45 on an annual basis. So 40 or 45 officers resign or retire. And this year it's, upwards of 160. And so with that attrition, we've needed to do several things. One, we have disbanded several units from within MPD and reallocated them to do more traditional law enforcement work like 911 response and investigation. So units like the community engagement team or the police athletic league, several other units that, look, we're doing great work, but serious times call for serious measures and we needed to divert those. Second, as you may have recently seen, we did receive a successful vote from the council that I entirely agree with, that will give Chief Arredondo some additional resources from other jurisdictions. Third, we have 3 new recruiting classes that will be coming on board next year. Those are in my proposed budget, and I hope and anticipate that they will get passed by the council. And then there's work that goes beyond policing. Not every call needs a response from an officer with a gun, and I think this safety beyond policing discussion is a really important one that cities around the country, and especially Minneapolis, are having right now. Whether it's a barking dog or a loud party, you don't need necessarily have an officer respond there. And that officer that would have responded is better served stopping violent crime from happening, doing the true policing work where we do in fact need his or her help. Mm-hmm. And so we've established several mechanisms to have an alternative response, whether it's our Minneapolis violence interrupters, or it's looking at other forms or other departments that could better respond to some of these lower level calls. That work is happening right now. And then finally, there's reform and change. And there's a number of policy decisions that are working their way through, but I want to call your attention to one. We've done policy changes ranging from, we've overhauled the use of force policy to make it more stringent. We've added all sorts of training. We've required de-escalation to be into the reporting structure so that every interaction that you have requires you to say what you did in order to de-escalate the situation as an officer. And there's this one issue, though, that often goes overlooked, which is the ability to shift the culture itself. Now, I'm a believer that culture is about people. It's about personnel. It's about being able to get the right officers in and the wrong officers out. And right now, due to mandatory arbitration law at the state level, the chief or I could fire somebody, and 50% of the time they get returned to the department because of this mandatory arbitration system. 50% of the time. And the chief has been clear, there's nothing more debilitating than disciplining or terminating an officer and having that same person who has ruined so much trust with the community come right back to the department to do more of that. So that's an issue that I think we all need to get behind. We all need to unite to get that law changed over at the state legislature. And it's one we're certainly going to be advocating for. But there's a lot of work that's happening in the range of public safety, of reform, and deep structural change. But it is essential.
There's a lot there, and I appreciate you kind of walking us through all those elements. This has become a national issue, right? And there's national reform efforts of all kinds taking place, and we're going to continue to have this. It's more than a debate. This is a huge scope of work where we need to make progress in Minneapolis and other communities, in St. Paul and other communities across this region and state. But it's just listening to you describe this, just to observe there is change. Things are changing, right? So we need to make some decisions as a people about what we want to have, but just to observe there's a direction and there's a momentum that presumably wasn't there a year ago.
There absolutely is. And I think right now, to your point, Peter, it's up to all of us to channel all of this energy and anger and pain, frustration into something productive. And there's a number of different outlets, but I mean, if we're all working together, if we're all on the same page, if we can agree, hey, yes, we need deep change and we need police, a both end approach, then I think it'll get us to those necessary changes even quicker.
And when it comes to policing and public safety or economic opportunity, which is where kind of Greater MSP spends most of our kind of collective energy as a partnership, we were not what we needed to be a year ago. And many of us knew that, and we talked about it. I think maybe through the course of 2020, it's become clear that not enough of us maybe realized that we weren't what we needed to be. But there are some shifts taking place that are not only creating the opportunity, but they're starting to really change the reality. I guess I'm encouraged and excited about the work that we can do in the next 6 months and year and every year after that to be much better than we've ever been.
I agree. And that sort of brings us full circle to this notion that this is an opportunity. Yes, it's been a rough year, to say the least, for Minneapolis. It's been a rough year for every city in our entire country, but I think it's particularly felt in an acute fashion here. But, out of great difficulty comes great solutions, comes great opportunity. And that's exactly where we are right now. And if we can kind of harness that energy and work together, I think we're very much on the up and up.
When I get a lot of questions about, voicing concern about, the reputation of Minneapolis-St. Paul around the world as a result of what's happened this year. And I certainly feel that as well. It impacts the opportunity that, the residents of our, region have. But my answer is really about, we're gonna make a better story. We're gonna have better facts, and then we're coming together and we're going to amplify that story, and that is what is going to move things. And
Peter, you're exactly right. And Minneapolis as a city, our region in the Twin Cities, we've always had a reputation for doing extraordinary things, at times ourselves. We've always had a reputation for building Fortune 500 companies right here in our region. They're not imported in, we do it here. We've had a reputation for an excellent education system, for raising extremely intelligent children that become entrepreneurs. We have this embedded ecosystem right here in the Twin Cities that allows us to sort of take the next step, and then for the rest of the world to see the change that we're making. I think, and so for 10 and 15 and 20 years from now, I want to look back and see this moment as the point where we decided to make the necessary change, where we created a forward-thinking vision, not just in the next week or next month sense, but 10 and 15 years down the road. And I think it's an opportunity to do things differently, and we should take advantage of it.
We must, and we will.
That's right.
Before we go, I appreciate your sharing your time to have this conversation. How's that baby girl?
She's awesome. Yeah. She was cooing just a second ago behind the computer screen, and then Sarah grabbed her. She's amazing. Every day she learns something. She's smiling. She's acknowledging my presence as a person, which is certainly a monumental piece. And we're in love and we're excited.
Well, that's fantastic. Well, it's great to see you. We're all cheering for you and ready to work with you.
Hey, well, Peter, thank you so much for your work over at Greater MSP. Thank you for your leadership. We're with you.
All right. Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you.